The alien girl's name was Lyra. She was young, full of energy, and always liked to tease others. When the human, Daniel, came to her village, she saw an easy target. He was tall, awkward, and still learning their customs. The villagers watched him with curiosity, some with distrust. Lyra thought it would be funny to play a little trick. Her family kept an old relic in their home. It was the armor of her ancestor, a warrior who fought hundreds of years ago. The armor was placed on a stand, polished but never touched. It was sacred, something no one dared to wear. The elders said it carried the spirit of the past. Lyra, however, only saw it as a dusty piece of history. One evening, when Daniel was sitting near the fire, Lyra grinned and said, "Do you want to look powerful, human? Try this armor on." She laughed as she pointed to the shining chest plate. Daniel raised his eyebrows. He shook his head at first, but the teasing eyes of the villagers made him give in. Slowly, he stood and approached the armor. The crowd gathered, whispering. They thought it would be impossible. The armor was built for Lyra's people, not for a human body. Everyone expected him to fail. Lyra smirked, waiting for the joke to humiliate him. Daniel hesitated, his hands shaking as he touched the cold metal. The armor felt heavier than stone, but something inside urged him to keep going. Piece by piece, he tried it on. First the arm guards, then the chest plate. To everyone's surprise, it seemed to adjust itself. The straps pulled tight on their own. The plates moved and fitted his form. The whispers grew louder. Some gasped, others laughed nervously. Lyra's smile faded for the first time. She didn't expect this. When Daniel placed the helmet over his head, the fire dimmed. A strange humming filled the air. The ground seemed to tremble. The armor glowed faintly. Symbols carved into the metal began to shine with golden light. The villagers stepped back in fear. Lyra's laughter stopped completely. Her eyes widened as the glow grew brighter. Daniel stumbled, clutching his chest. A surge of energy flowed through him. His heart raced, his vision sharpened. He could hear whispers in a language he did not know. The armor pulsed like it was alive, Lyra whispered. "This is impossible." The elders rushed forward, shouting for him to remove it, but the armor did not let go. It clung to him as if it had chosen him. Suddenly, a shockwave burst from Daniel's body. The fire was blown out. Sparks flew into the night sky. The villagers fell to the ground, covering their faces. Daniel stood at the center, glowing like a star. His eyes were filled with light. His voice trembled. "What is happening to me?" Silence followed. Only the sound of the armor's hum filled the air. The elders looked at each other with fear. They had guarded this armor for generations, and not once had it awakened. Now, in front of their eyes, a human had done it. Lyra's prank had turned into something dangerous. She stepped back, her heart pounding. She didn't mean for this to happen. Daniel tried to pull the helmet off, but his hands shook too much. The armor held tight. A vision flashed before his eyes. Flames, battles, warriors screaming. He saw the ancestor, a great alien warrior, standing tall in the same armor. The voice echoed in his head. "Bearer chosen, destiny awakened." The villagers whispered, some in awe, others in terror. "The human. He is the chosen one. This cannot be. The prophecy is broken." The words spread quickly. Their world had just changed. Lyra felt guilt rise in her chest. She only wanted to laugh. She never believed the stories of her ancestors' armor. But now, seeing Daniel standing like a figure from legend, she felt both fear and wonder. She whispered softly, "What have I done?" Daniel looked around, his body trembling. He did not want this power. He did not want to be the center of their fear. But the armor pulsed again, as if reminding him that he was no longer the same. The villagers kept their distance, afraid to come closer. The night air felt heavier, filled with suspense. The fire slowly came back to life, flickering weakly. Daniel stood still, his shadow stretching long across the ground. The armor glowed with a steady light. Everyone knew nothing would ever be the same again, and so, what started as a joke became the beginning of a legend. The morning after Daniel wore the armor, the Village was still buzzing with what had happened. Lyra couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, every moment replaying in her mind. She never thought a joke would lead to something like this. The human, once just an outsider, was now the center of attention. The armor that had been her family's pride for generations was now bound to him. Lyra sighed and stood up. She needed answers, and she knew exactly where to find them. The elders were already gathered at the council hall. Their worried faces greeted her as she walked in. They were deep in discussion when Lyra stepped inside. They stopped and turned to look at her. Her heart raced. She had to face them. "Lyra, come sit," one of the elders, High Elder Tolan, said. His voice was stern, but his eyes were filled with concern. "You've caused much trouble with your prank. You should have never allowed him to touch the armor. Do you understand the danger you have unleashed?" Lyra lowered her head. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just a joke. I never thought—" "Stop." Another elder, Elder Drell, interrupted sharply. "You do not understand what you've done. The armor you so casually allowed him to wear is not just a relic. It holds the power of our ancestors. It is sacred. It should not be taken lightly." Lyra felt her stomach twist. She hadn't known. She didn't fully understand what the armor truly was. She only heard the legends and thought them to be tales told to keep young ones in line. But now it was real, and she had been the one to awaken it. The council members exchanged glances, their voices low as they spoke among themselves. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. The tension in the air was thick. Daniel was an outsider, yet the armor had chosen him. He was connected to their ancient power now, and they weren't sure whether that was a blessing or a curse. "We must speak to him," Elder Tolan said finally, his voice calm, but with an edge of authority. "The armor has awakened, and we need to know what this human can do with it. We cannot risk the safety of our people. The fate of this village might depend on him, whether we like it or not." Lyra nodded. She knew it was the only way. But as they prepared to meet with Daniel, she felt a growing unease. How could they trust him? He was just a human, unprepared for what he now carried. And yet, she couldn't ignore the truth. He had survived the trials of the armor, and he was now bound to it. When they found Daniel, he was sitting by the edge of the village, staring. Out at the horizon, he looked calm, but there was a strange unease about him. The armor still glowed faintly beneath his clothes, as if it was alive. The villagers had kept their distance, whispering about him, some afraid, others curious. "Daniel," Lyra called out softly. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "You're not happy to see me, are you?" he said with a weak smile, his voice filled with doubt. "No," Lyra replied quickly. "It's not that. It's just, I didn't expect any of this to happen. You're not supposed to be wearing that armor. You shouldn't be its bearer. We have to figure out what this means." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know I never asked for this. I didn't even want to wear it, but now it's like it's a part of me. I don't know how to take it off. I don't know how to control it." Lyra could see the fear in his eyes. He wasn't proud of this power. He didn't want to be chosen. He just wanted to be normal. She understood that, but she couldn't let him off the hook so easily. The armor was not just a piece of metal. It was a symbol of their past, a force that could change the future. They needed to figure out what he was capable of. "You're going to have to meet with the council," Lyra said softly. "We need to understand how this happened, and what you can do with the armor. It's not just for show, it's a weapon, it's a legacy, and now it's in your hands." Daniel sighed. "I don't want to be anyone's weapon, I don't want to fight, but it feels like this armor is pushing me to do something I don't understand." They walked together toward the council hall. The villagers parted, making way for them. Some of them still looked at Daniel with suspicion. Others watched with awe. His every step was filled with uncertainty, the armor's faint glow casting strange shadows on the ground. When they entered the hall, all eyes turned to him. The elders stood, their faces serious, waiting for him to speak. "Tell us what you know, human," Elder Tolan said, his voice firm. "What is this armor? How did it choose you?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. He wasn't sure what to say. The truth was, he didn't understand any of this. The armor had chosen him, but for what purpose? He had no idea. "I don't know how it happened," Daniel said finally. "I just put it on and then everything changed. It's like something inside me awakened, something that wasn't there before, but I don't understand it. I don't even know how to control it." The elders exchanged looks, their fears growing. This was not a simple mistake. The armor had chosen Daniel for a reason, and that reason was becoming clearer with every passing moment. They would have, to prepare for what was coming. "We must be cautious," Elder Drell said softly. "This is only the beginning. The power of the armor is greater than we can comprehend, and it has chosen an outsider. We do not know what this means for our future." As the council continued to discuss the matter, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. She had thought it was just a joke, but now it was clear. This was no laughing matter. The human had awakened something ancient, something that could change the fate of their entire world. The days that followed Daniel's awakening were filled with uncertainty. He spent most of his time alone, sitting in the village square trying to understand the armor. But every time he touched it, a surge of power ran through his body. He couldn't control it. He didn't want to control it. The villagers watched from a distance, their eyes filled with fear and curiosity. Lyra couldn't ignore the fact that she was responsible for all of this. She had been the one to pull the armor down from its stand. She had been the one to make the joke that led to Daniel wearing it. She hadn't meant for it to happen, but now it had. The armor was alive, and it had chosen him. The elders were growing restless. Their patience was running thin. The power of the armor was undeniable, but it was also uncontrollable. They needed to know if Daniel was truly worthy of it, if he could harness its strength, or if it would destroy him and them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village, High Elder Tolan called for a council meeting. The atmosphere was heavy with tension as Daniel, Lyra, and the other villagers gathered in the council hall. The elders stood in a circle, their faces grim. "We can no longer ignore the power of this armor," Elder Tolan said, his voice firm. "It is time for a trial. We must see if the human can truly wield the power of the armor, or if it will overwhelm him. We cannot risk the safety of our people. The prophecy speaks of a chosen one, but we must test him first, to see if he is worthy." Lyra's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the decision in the air. She didn't want Daniel to be put to the test, but she knew it was necessary. He was the only one who could save them if the armor's power was real, and if it could be controlled. She glanced at Daniel, who looked terrified. "Daniel," Lyra said softly, walking up to him. "They won't harm you. They just need to know what the armor can do. We need to understand if it can be used for good, or if it will destroy us all." Daniel nodded, his hands trembling as he stared at the elders. He wasn't sure if he could do this, but he knew he had no choice. "What do I have to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You will face the trial," Elder Tolan said. "It will test your mind, your body, and your spirit. The armor will challenge you, but you must fight to stay in control. You must prove that you are worthy of its power." The trial would take place in the ancient arena, a place of legends where the greatest warriors of their time had fought for honor and glory. The arena was deep in the heart of the village, surrounded by towering stone walls. It was a place where only the strongest survived, and only the bravest dared to enter. Daniel followed the elders to the arena, his heart pounding in his chest. The air felt thick with anticipation as they entered the stone circle. The villagers gathered around the outer edges, their eyes fixed on Daniel. Lyra stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "You can do this," she whispered. Daniel gave her a weak smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He wasn't sure if he could do this. He didn't feel like a warrior. He didn't even feel like he belonged here. But he was the one who had worn the armor. He was the one the elders had chosen. The trial began. The armor hummed as it came to life. The energy inside Daniel's body surged again, this time stronger than ever. His muscles tensed, his vision blurred. The ground beneath him began to shift and shake. He struggled to stay on his feet as the arena transformed around him. Illusions appeared first. The ground cracked open and flames shot up from the cracks. Daniel had to jump back to avoid being burned. Then, towering creatures made of shadows and smoke rose from the ground. Their eyes glowed with malice as they reached for him. The armor seemed to respond to the danger, the plates shifting and molding to protect him. Daniel instinctively raised his arm to shield his face, and just as he did, a wall of fire shot toward him. The heat was unbearable, but the armor absorbed the flames. His heart raced as he realized he wasn't alone in this. The armor was protecting him. "You are the chosen one," a voice boomed inside his mind. The voice was deep and ancient, filled with power. But can you control the power within you? Daniel gritted his teeth, focusing all his energy on staying calm. He couldn't lose control. He had to trust the armor. He didn't have a choice. The creatures of smoke lunged at him, but with one swift motion, he slashed his arm through the air. The armor responded, sending out a shockwave that knocked the creatures back. The villagers watched in awe. They had never seen anything like this. The armor glowed brighter with each passing moment. As Daniel fought back the shadows, sweat poured down his face, but he refused to give up. The fire, the creatures, everything was testing him. But he pushed forward, driven by the need to protect. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the trial ended. The creatures vanished. The flames died down and the arena returned to normal. Daniel stood panting, his body aching, but the armor still glowed, still pulsed with life. He had passed the trial. The elders approached, their faces filled with a mix of awe and respect. "You have done it," Elder Tolan said, his voice softer now. "You have proven yourself worthy. The armor has accepted you. But with this power comes great responsibility. You must use it wisely, for the future of our people depends on you." Lyra stood beside Daniel, a proud smile on her face. "You did it," she whispered. Daniel looked at her, his heart still racing. "I didn't do it alone, the armor. It helped me." He knew this was just the beginning. The power inside him was still growing, but he also knew he wasn't alone. He had allies now, and he would do everything in his power to protect them. The days after Daniel's trial were filled with both relief and uncertainty. The village was calmer now, and for the first time the villagers looked at Daniel with a mix of respect and awe. They no longer whispered about the human who wore the armor. Now, he was the one they looked to for guidance, but despite the quiet, something else loomed on the horizon. Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that this peace wouldn't last. The power inside Daniel was growing stronger by the day, and though he had passed the trial, she knew that the armor wasn't the only thing that had noticed him. A dark shadow was spreading across the galaxy, and it was only a matter of time before they came. It had been 3 days since the trial, and Daniel was still adjusting to his new role. He trained with the armor, learning how to control it, but every day felt like a new battle. The armor was powerful, yes, but it was also unpredictable. It responded to his emotions, to his thoughts, and sometimes that made things worse. Lyra was walking beside him when the news arrived. A scout ran into the village, his face pale with fear. "Elder Tolan," he gasped. "The enemy is coming, they've returned." The words hit like a thunderclap. The entire village froze. Daniel and Lyra turned to face the scout. His words didn't make sense. The enemy? Who was he talking about? "The Galroks," the scout continued, his voice shaking. "They've found us, they know about the armor, they know about him." The scout pointed at Daniel. "They're coming for him. They're coming for the power he wields." Lyra felt her heart drop into her stomach. The Galroks. They were a brutal, merciless race that had once nearly destroyed her people. They were feared across the galaxy for their relentless conquests and their thirst for power. The elders had told stories of them, how they had wiped out entire civilizations just to claim their technology, and now they were coming for Daniel, coming for the very thing that had made him different, the armor that had chosen him. The village had been at peace for so long, but the past was coming back to haunt them. "We have to prepare," Elder Tolan said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We will gather our forces, we will defend this village. We will not let them take what is ours." But even as he said the words, there was a sense of doubt in his eyes. The Galroks were not easily defeated, and Daniel, despite his strength, was still learning to wield the armor's power. The elders knew they would need more than just strength. They would need strategy. They would need unity. Lyra turned to Daniel, who was staring at the ground, his face a mask of uncertainty. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Daniel, you've trained, you know how to fight now, you can do this, we need you." Daniel shook his head. "I don't want to fight, Lyra. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of it. But now, I don't know how to stop it." His voice cracked with frustration. The weight of the situation was heavy, and he didn't feel ready to carry it. "I didn't ask for this either," Lyra said softly. "But we don't have a choice. The Galroks are coming, and we need to fight for our home. We need to fight for our future." Daniel looked at her, his eyes filled with doubt, but something in his heart stirred. He had made it through the trial. He had faced the armor's power, and he had survived. He couldn't run from this. "Not anymore, I'll do it," Daniel said, his voice firm now. "I don't know if I can stop them, but I'll try." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of relief. He wasn't the same man who had arrived in their village weeks ago. He had changed. He had embraced the power within him, and now he was ready to fight for their people. The council began to prepare. The villagers gathered their weapons, and Daniel was put through a series of advanced training drills. The armor responded quickly to his commands, but there was still so much he didn't understand. He didn't know how to tap into its full power, and that scared him. The Galroks were not just an enemy. They were a force of nature, cold, calculating, and unstoppable. They wouldn't just attack. They would destroy everything in their path. The elders knew this battle would be unlike any other. Lyra and Daniel stood side by side, watching the horizon. "They'll be here soon," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. She had never seen anything like the Galroks, and she knew that the coming battle would test them all. "Do you think we can win?" Daniel asked, his voice low. Lyra didn't answer right away. She had no way of knowing, but she had to believe they could. They had to fight, not just for themselves, but for the future of their people. "I don't know," she said finally. "But we have to try." As night fell, the village prepared for what was to come. The villagers stood at their posts, weapons in hand, watching for any sign of the enemy. Daniel stood at the front wearing the armor, ready for whatever came. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his thoughts were clouded with doubt. But as the first signs of movement appeared, on the horizon, Daniel stood tall. He wasn't just a human anymore, he was a warrior, a protector. And the only hope his people had, the Galroks, would not take them without a fight. The enemy had returned, and so had the legacy of the armor. The air was thick with tension as the villagers took their positions. The Galroks were close, and Daniel could feel their presence in the air like a storm ready to break. The armor pulsed with energy beneath his skin, each beat of his heart, in sync with the ancient power inside him. But even with all the strength the armor gave him, doubt gnawed at him. Lyra stood beside him, watching the horizon with a quiet intensity. She had been by his side since the beginning, guiding him, teaching him, and now she was more than just a friend. She was his ally, his partner in this fight. They had both come a long way since that first joke with the armor, since that moment when Lyra had unknowingly awakened a power that could change everything. Daniel glanced at her, and for the first time he saw her not as a girl who had tricked him, but as someone who had become essential to his survival. "Lyra," he said softly, "I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I can stop them. The Galroks are unlike anything we've faced before." Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a fierce calm. "You've already done what no one else could, Daniel. You've survived the trials of the armor. You've learned to control it. And now, you're our last hope. But you're not alone. We're all here with you." He nodded slowly, his mind racing. He had never asked for this, but now it was all he had. The armor had chosen him, and though he feared what that might mean, he couldn't turn away from it. He couldn't let his fear stop him from protecting those who had shown him kindness, who had believed in him when no one else had. As the sun set, the first wave of Galrock ships appeared on the horizon. Their massive, dark silhouettes blocked out the last light of the day. The village held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The Galrox had arrived, and they weren't here for peace. Daniel felt the power of the armor surge within him. It was like a call to action. The energy in his veins was both a blessing and a curse. He could feel it, the weight of responsibility, pressing down on him. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about saving everyone. Lyra squeezed his hand. "We'll fight together. You're not alone." He looked at her, her determination shining through. He had never seen her like this before. She wasn't just the girl who had made a mistake. She was a warrior in her own right. She had helped him every step of the way, and now they were about to face the greatest challenge of their lives. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. "I wouldn't have made it this far without you," Lyra smiled. "We make a good team." The first Galrox soldiers landed on the outskirts of the village. Their armored suits glinted menacingly in the dying light of the sun. The ground shook beneath their feet as they marched forward. Their leaders, tall, terrifying creatures, led the charge. Their cold, yellow eyes locked onto Daniel. They had come for the armor, and they wouldn't stop until they had it. The village erupted into action. The elders gave their orders, and the villagers readied their weapons. But Daniel knew this wasn't just about fighting with swords and shields. This was about something much bigger, something only he could do. Lyra looked at him. "Now's the time, Daniel. Show them what the armor can really do." With a deep breath, Daniel stepped forward. He raised his hand, and the armor responded, glowing with a fierce golden light. The energy surged through him, and in that moment, he knew exactly what he had to do. The armor was not just a weapon, it was a part of him, a tool to protect, to defend, and to fight for what was right. He lifted his arm, and the ground beneath the Galrox army cracked open. Massive rocks rose from the earth like weapons, hurling themselves at the enemy. The Galrox soldiers tried to dodge, but the power of the armor was too much. The rocks crashed into them, sending them flying back. The villagers cheered, but the Galrox were not easily defeated. Their ships began to fire, lasers streaking across the sky. But Daniel raised his arm again, creating a shield of energy to protect the village. The blasts hit the shield, but they couldn't break through. Daniel was in control now. He was no longer the confused human who had stumbled into their world. He was the warrior the armor had chosen. But even as the Galrox faltered, their forces were too vast. More ships landed, and the battle raged on. Daniel could feel the armor's power waning. It was taking everything he had to keep the shield up, and he could sense that the Galrox were preparing for a final push. "You have to end this, Daniel," Lyra shouted, her voice full of urgency. "You have the power. You can stop them. Don't let them destroy everything we've built." Daniel turned to her, his body trembling from exhaustion. "I don't know if I can. I don't know how to." "Make it stop." Lyra's face softened. "You can do this. You've already proven that you can. Just trust yourself. Trust the armor. It's not about strength. It's about heart. You've always had the heart of a warrior. Now you just need to believe it." The Galrox were getting closer, their ships blocking out the sky. Daniel looked at Lyra, and for the first time, he felt a surge of confidence. He wasn't alone in this fight. He had Lyra, he had the villagers, and most importantly, he had the armor. With one final push, Daniel gathered every ounce of strength he had left. The armor responded, wrapping him in its golden light, and with that light he unleashed a wave of energy that rippled across the battlefield. It was like a tidal wave sweeping the Galrox off their feet. The energy didn't kill. It disabled, knocking out their ships and sending their soldiers fleeing. The battle was won, but not without a cost. Daniel collapsed to his knees, the energy from the armor leaving him drained. But he had done it. He had saved the village. Lyra rushed to his side, her face filled with relief. "You did it," she whispered, her voice full of awe. Daniel looked up at her, exhausted but proud. "We did it." The victory was short-lived. The Galrox forces had retreated, but the cost of battle weighed heavily on Daniel and the village. The armor had given him power, yes, but it had also taken a toll on him. He lay in a bed, his body bruised and exhausted. Lyra was by his side tending to his wounds, but she could see the strain in his eyes. He had pushed himself beyond his limits. "Are you sure you're okay?" Lyra asked softly. gently applying a cool cloth to his forehead. Daniel nodded weakly. I'll be fine, it's just… The armor takes a lot out of me. I didn't think it would be like this. I feel like it's always calling for more. His voice was filled with uncertainty. Lyra frowned, her fingers lightly brushing his hair. You've done more than anyone could have asked. You've saved us. You've stopped the Galrocks. But I know you're not feeling like a hero. I can see it in your eyes. You're scared, aren't you? Daniel turned his head to look at her. His eyes darkened with the weight of everything that had happened. I'm not scared of the Galrocks anymore. I'm scared of what's coming next. I don't know how to control this power. I don't know what's inside the armor. It's like it's living. It's too much, Lyra. Lyra sat beside him, taking his hand. You've always had control, Daniel. You just don't realize it yet. The armor chose you for a reason, but it's not just the armor you have to control. It's yourself. You're stronger than you think. Daniel closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. I want to believe that I do, but it feels like there's something inside of me, something darker waiting to break free. I'm afraid that if I lose control again, I'll hurt someone. I won't be able to stop it. Lyra squeezed his hand. You won't be alone. You'll never be alone. We'll fight this together. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. We're all in this with you. As the days passed, the village began to rebuild, but the quiet peace was shattered once again when the ground trembled. Daniel and Lyra rushed outside to find the sky filled with smoke. The Galrocks had returned, but this time, they were not alone. They had brought their full might with them, a fleet of ships, each one larger and more dangerous than the last. This is it, Daniel whispered, his heart sinking. Lyra's eyes narrowed. We won't let them win. The villagers scrambled to defend their homes, but they knew they were outmatched. The Galrocks had come prepared. They weren't just here for the armor. They were here to destroy everything. The village was in their sights, and they would stop at nothing to burn it to the ground. Daniel stood at the front of the village, the armor glowing faintly as he braced himself for the battle ahead. He knew this time would be different. The enemy was stronger, smarter, and they would not retreat so easily. Lyra stood beside him. We have to stop them before they reach the heart of the village. We can't let them destroy everything we've fought for. I know, Daniel said, his voice filled with determination. This time I won't hold back. The Galrocks' ships hovered above the village, their weapons aimed at the homes and buildings below. The ground shook as the first wave of Galrock soldiers dropped from the ships. Their heavy boots hit the earth with a deafening thud, and they advanced toward the village with ruthless efficiency. Daniel raised his arm, and the armor responded, a surge of power coursing through him. He could feel the energy build. He had to focus, to control it, but the fear was still there, the fear of losing himself. He couldn't afford to let that happen. Again, not now. The first wave of Galrock soldiers reached him, but before they could even strike, Daniel's armor erupted in light. A force field shot out from him, knocking the soldiers back with incredible force. They scrambled to get up, but Daniel was already charging. The armor was an extension of him now. His movements were fluid, controlled. Lyra followed him, her own weapon drawn. She fought fiercely alongside him, her movements sharp and precise. She wasn't just protecting the village, she was protecting Daniel, the one who had become her closest ally. The battle raged on, the Galrocks kept coming wave after wave, but Daniel and Lyra were unstoppable. Each blow he struck seemed to take down dozens of enemies. The armor responded to his every command, but with each attack he could feel the strain on his body. The power inside him was too much, and he could feel it slipping. Daniel, Lyra shouted as she cut down another soldier. She looked back to see him struggling to stand. The armor's glow had dimmed, and his movements had slowed. She rushed to his side. You're pushing yourself too hard. You need to rest. I'll fight with you. But Daniel shook his head, his eyes wild. I can't stop. If I stop now, we'll lose everything. His breath was heavy, his muscles aching, but he wouldn't give up. Lyra looked around, seeing the destruction the Galrocks had caused, but she also saw the villagers fighting. They were holding their ground. The Galrocks were not unstoppable. They were just relentless. She knew they could win, but it wouldn't be easy. Daniel, we need to get to the heart of the village. We need to take out their leader, Lyra said, pulling him up. If we take him down, the rest will fall. With a final burst of strength, Daniel nodded. The two of them pushed through the battle, fighting side by side. They reached the Galrock's leader, a massive creature covered in dark armor. He was standing near the center of the village, directing the attacks. This ends now, Daniel said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. He raised his arm and the armor flared to life. The energy around him grew, pulsing with power. The Galrock's leader turned to face him, but it was too late. With a roar, Daniel unleashed everything he had. The energy surged from his body like a tidal wave, crashing into the leader. The force of the blast sent the Galrocks flying backward. His armor cracked, his body crumpled to the ground, and with that, the battle was won. The remaining Galrock soldiers retreated, their morale shattered. The village had held its ground, thanks to Daniel and Lyra. But as Daniel stood there looking over the battlefield, he knew this fight was far from over. The battle was over, but the village was forever changed. The Galrocks had been defeated, their leaders scattered, and the last remnants of their army had fled into the dark expanse of space. But even with the victory, Daniel knew there was a price to pay. The armor had taken its toll, and he was exhausted. Both physically and emotionally, he stood at the edge of the village watching as the last of the Galrock ships disappeared into the sky. Lyra was beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. They had fought together, side by side, and now, for the first time in weeks, there was a sense of peace. But the peace was fragile. Daniel could feel it. The armor had brought them this far, but it was still a mystery. It had chosen him. But why, and what would happen next? He still didn't fully understand its power, its true purpose. He had used it to protect the village, to fight back the Galrocks, but there was a lingering fear inside him. What if the armor's true purpose was something darker than he imagined? Lyra turned to him, sensing his unease. "You're quiet," she said softly. "I know you're thinking about the armor, but we've made it through, Daniel. We've won." Daniel nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. "I don't know if I can keep using it, Lyra. The armor's power is too much. What if it consumes me? What if I lose myself?" His voice was filled with doubt. Lyra took a deep breath. "You've already shown that you're not controlled by it, Daniel. You've proven that you can handle it. You've saved the village. You've saved us. You're the true bearer of the armor. But the armor isn't what makes you strong. It's you. You've always had the heart of a warrior. The armor just gave you the chance to show it." Her words sank into him like a steady anchor. He had feared the armor's power, but now he realized that it wasn't about the armor at all. It was about who he had become while wearing it, what he had learned, the strength he had discovered in himself. He had never asked for this, but now he knew he had to accept it. "I don't know if I'm ready for the responsibility," Daniel admitted, "but I can't walk away from it now. I can't abandon these people." Lyra smiled. "Then you're already ready, because you care, and that's what matters the most. You've already proven that you're not like the others. You fight for what's right. You protect those who need you." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the world heavy on both of them. But for the first time, Daniel felt the burden begin to lift. He had been chosen, yes, but he was. Not alone. Lyra was with him, the village was with him, and together they could face anything. The elders came to them, their faces weary but filled with respect. High Elder Tolan stepped forward. "You have done what no one thought possible, Daniel. You have defeated the Galrocks and saved our village. But there is more to this than just one battle." Daniel turned to face the elder. "What do you mean?" Tolan smiled, though it was a tired smile. "The Galrocks were just one part of a much larger threat. There are other forces out there, in the galaxy, and they will come for us again. We cannot let our guard down." Lyra looked at Tolan. "You mean they'll keep coming, until we're wiped out?" Tolan nodded solemnly. "Yes. The Galrocks are part of a much larger empire, and though they've been defeated here, their masters will seek revenge. We will need to be ready." Daniel's heart sank. The fight was far from over. But he wasn't. The same person he had been when he first arrived in the village. He had changed, he had learned, and now he had a new purpose. He wasn't just a human caught in the middle of a war. He was the protector of this village, the true bearer of the armor. "I won't let them destroy everything we've built," Daniel said, his voice filled with conviction. "We'll be ready for them. I won't run. I won't hide. I'll fight." Lyra stepped closer to him, her eyes shining with pride. "That's what I want to hear." The elders nodded. "We will train. We will rebuild our strength. We will stand together. And when the time comes, we will fight as one." Daniel looked at the villagers, who were gathered around, their faces filled with hope and determination. They had fought alongside him, and they would fight again. This wasn't just his battle, it was theirs. They had all become part of something bigger than themselves, something that could change the galaxy. The armor glowed brightly in the distance, as if to echo his thoughts. It was a reminder of the power within him, but also of the responsibility that came with it. He could feel its energy thrumming in his veins, but now he knew that it was his to control. It wasn't a weapon, it was a tool, and it was up to him to decide how to use it. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. "Together, we'll be unstoppable," she said. "No matter what comes next, we'll face it together." And for the first time, Daniel believed her.